All right, dissever or not dissever? That is the question. We thought we sort of had an answer. Maybe we do have an answer, but basically what you were watching was the first televised hearing in Trump's Georgia election case there in Fulton County, Georgia. Trump and his allies, as you know, have been accused of interfering in Georgia's 2020 election results, trying to flip the state away from Joe Biden. Allegations of racketeering, organized crime, a RICO case, as you know, is what's in play here. And the question is, two of those co-defendants wanted separate trials, didn't want to be a part of the entire posse here, where we had heard trial could begin October 23rd. So, Nima Rahmani, you are legal beagle here. Sort of break down what you heard and what you think is going to happen. It sounds like these two former attorneys, Sidney Powell and Kenneth Chesebro, tried to invoke a right for a speedy trial, sever themselves from Trump and the rest of the co-defendants. But it doesn't look like the judge is going for it.
No, Judge McAfee was not having it. He denied their severance motion. And, this was part of the Trump team's entire defense's legal strategy. Several of the defendants, two so far, have asserted their right to a speedy trial. Of course, that's Sidney Powell and Ken Chesebro. And of course, Trump has argued the opposite, that he needs more time. He's trying to push this out till past the November 2024 general election. And as part of that severance motion, the attorneys for Powell and Chesebro argued that there's no way that the cases should be tried together. They need to be tried separately. They have an absolute right to a speedy trial. And although it was a compelling argument, Judge McAfee rejected it. And they also discussed several of the other factors under Georgia law that would make severance appropriate. But at the end of the day, severance is something that the defense has the burden of raising and proving, that the trials would be unfair if joined together. And the judge says they were unable to meet that burden.
And just looking at the point of this being unfair, that's because if two of these individuals had trials before that October 23rd, a lot of things would, especially if this is televised, right? A lot of things would be revealed, facts, details, charges, and that could impact all the other cases unfairly. Am I understanding that right? That it's just, I guess, safer when you're looking at something that is so political as well, to keep it all together for the sake of one side or the other not being able to cry foul here? Because this isn't just a legal case. As we know, the political implications are huge.
Oh, absolutely. And it's an issue of fairness and an issue of judicial economy. You have, defendants going first, you have witnesses testifying, and, the judge said, even though the party said it may take up to 4 months, it may take much longer than that. So you're going to have jurors sitting through multiple trials. You're going to have witnesses that are going to have to testify time and time again. And from a fairness perspective, the defense just hasn't met its burden. And when you're looking at Georgia law, severance is really appropriate under one of three circumstances. If, there's so many defendants that it creates a likelihood of confusion of the law or the evidence. But, we saw the YSL case that the defense raised. You have more than a dozen defendants there, and they're all being tried at the same time. The second scenario arises when, evidence that might be admissible against one defendant is inadmissible against another. That sometimes happens in the confession or admission context, where, the state wants to use a confession against one defendant. That defendant has invoked his or her right to remain silent, and another defendant is unable to cross-examine them. It's a Supreme Court case called Bruton, but it's unclear that any of that applies, that there's evidence that's going to be admissible against one co-conspirator, but not the other. And the third is inconsistent defenses. And the judge said, there's going to be finger pointing in this case, but it's not different from any other multi-defendant case. Everyone tries to blame someone else who's more culpable. So, given all the circumstances, the judge says, in the interest of judicial economy, having the case be televised once, the jurors hear the case once, all these witnesses, we're not going to have 19 trials. We're going to try to have one trial in this case. At least that's where things stand so far. This is a huge win for the prosecution and the Fulton County District Attorney's Office, because it's going to put maximum pressure on these defendants now to either reach some sort of plea agreement, flip and cooperate against the former president, or get ready for trial in a short period of time.
And also, do you think after what we learned today, we could start to see some of these co-defendants start to flip?
I think so. It's interesting to see how this case, is handled differently from a legal strategy perspective than Jack Smith's case. Of course, Jack Smith took a surgical approach in D.C. He didn't charge any of the co-conspirators. They're all unindicted because he wanted to get that case to trial as quickly as possible. And it worked. Judge Chutkan there in D.C. scheduled a March 2024 trial date. In this case in Fulton County, Fani Willis wanted to charge everyone to put maximum pressure on them to flip, to cooperate. These aren't career criminals. These are attorneys. Many of them have never been arrested or spent any time in prison. So now that there's pressure on them, the case is actually scheduled for trial. I wouldn't be surprised to see folks like maybe Mark Meadows and others start to flip and start to cooperate. So that's her strategy. And that's why this case is different than the DC case.
Nima, the judge also said there as he wrapped up that, okay, let's start having weekly sessions on a Thursday or a Friday. What does he mean by weekly sessions, and what will happen within those weekly sessions now?
Well, we're going to see a lot of law in motion in this case. Just like there was a lengthy hearing today, we should expect to see this on a weekly basis. I would expect to see other severance motions. We already know that, Meadows and others are going to try to remove their case from state to federal court, saying that they were acting in their official capacity. The judge already raised the potential executive immunity issue that Trump is going to raise, saying that he can't be prosecuted by, a state authority for acts in his official capacity as president. Of course, the state will say that, the audit and the litigation and campaigning just in general is not part of a president's official duties. But the judge is anticipating a lot of motions, a lot of legal arguments. So he's setting aside time every week to hear those arguments and sort through them.
So, John, do we know if Trump was even paying attention to this? Because we're looking at this radio interview that he just did with Hugh Hewitt saying if he's asked to testify, he will.
Yeah, and he said it for any of the cases that he faces, Kira, that he would take the stand. And listen, Donald Trump is certainly not new to being under oath questioned. The man's done hundreds of depositions, one of which was just released by the New York State Attorney General just a couple of days ago. So it's not too surprising that Donald Trump is saying that. Now, obviously, what he says and what he ultimately ends up doing are two very different things. But I just want to back up a second, though, because looking at what just happened in court here, obviously we saw what happened with Powell and Chesebro, that those two are going to be moving forward towards October 23rd. But the fact the judge hasn't said, Kira, what's going to happen yet for Team Trump, I mean, that's really the thing that they need to figure out, because as the judge noted here, we have just a couple of weeks until this really gets rocking and rolling. So if they don't come to a decision, or if something happens in the federal courts that one or all of the defendants gets removed, that creates a whole new situation. I think the other thing that was interesting, the judge just noted, going through all the different scenarios, it almost felt like you were playing a game of life in real time as the judge was going through this could happen, that could happen. But the judge focusing, Kira, on Mark Meadows trying to remove his case from state to federal court. Meadows is one of 5. There are 4 other people that have filed the similar motions to move their cases. So if Meadows doesn't work, as one attorney involved in this case said to me, we've got 4 other chances. Somebody else could move the case. So that obviously all impacts what's about to happen. And I think the other thing that was just striking is that the judge really pushing prosecutors there, though as Nehemiah said, it's a win for them for sure, but pushing prosecutors that, no, we don't have 2 weeks, 10 days. You've got less than a week. If you really want to do this, if you really want to move this case forward for October 23rd, time to put up and time to move ahead.
So, John, Trump has been arrested now 4 times in a year. We've seen a few pictures here and there from when he's been in the courtroom. He was banned from YouTube after January 6th. Now you can watch these proceedings live streamed. The judge said, okay, we're going to do it. It's the first time ever for Trump indictments.
Yeah.
So we saw today that there were just attorneys there representing their clients. But is there a possibility, as this goes forward, and we're talking about 18 other co-defendants, that we could actually see live pictures of a former President Donald Trump standing in the courtroom next to his attorneys in front of a judge? Or is the likelihood of that forget about it.
No, Kira, the likelihood is I hope they're watching you and me here on ABC News Live as we're throwing to it, because that is going to be our reality. Donald Trump is most certainly going to be front and center sitting there. And you don't have to even take my word for it, Kira. Look what's going on at a case in that building right now, another RICO case against over 30 defendants. There are cameras in there every day. There are rows and rows of defense tables for all of those defendants and their attorneys to be together. So at the moment, that seems to be the way this is going, Kira. They all will be together in Fulton County, Georgia. The question, though, remains, is it going to be October? Is it going to be next year? That is something, as the judge said, he needs weekly sessions now with all the lawyers to decide what to do.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.